Welcome back to the IE427 Garage, everybody. Today we're going to take a closer look at Slthrr N. Alright, I've been hesitant to even do a video about Slthrr N because this is not what the channel is primarily about. The channel is primarily, as I've said in the past, to keep customers caught up on what's going on their cars, and also to keep builders, some of you may be builders right now of Factory 5 Mark IVs or earlier, and it's to kind of give you some tips and kind of steer you around the pitfalls of what you may run into while building a car. So I think what I'm going to do in this video is go over the most predominant features of Slthrr N. And what I'll do in the next video, because I think there's going to be 3 videos. In the next video, I'll go over some of the specs, meaning engine, transmission, stuff like that. And then probably some of the finer details. A lot of those little things that people miss when they look at this car for the first time, or sometimes the second or third time. And then the last video, probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to put together more of a glamour shots type finish video out on the driveway, like we do some of the customer builds. Because quite honestly, Slthrr N's never had that. I've never gone through the whole graduation thread on any of the forums or on Facebook because it just wasn't important to me. I drove this car for almost 10 years with no paint. Meaning I drove this car in gel coat. I was not finished. I was not to the point with this car that I wanted to get it painted. Now that doesn't mean that I didn't talk Jeff Miller's ear off every time I had another harebrained idea about adding another body modification to the car. But I wanted to make sure that I didn't have any regrets when the car was done. I didn't want to have to go back and revisit something that I had thought about initially, talked myself out of, and then had to work backwards in order to get the car where I wanted it to be when I was all done. So let's work on getting the cover off of Slthrr N. And I'll start walking you around the car, and we'll talk about some of, again, the most predominant features that just stand out the first time you see this car. All right, one of the things, or probably the biggest thing that everyone sees when they initially see this car is obviously the hardtop. The hardtop was one of the last things that I did to the car. Excuse the dust, that's why we're going to split this into 3 videos, because I think the second video I'm going to go through and I'm going to do a complete detail of Slthrr N in the midst of that video, so you guys can see kind of what my yearly maintenance routine might be, and also what what I do when I'm detailing a car for final delivery to a customer. So the hardtop I have, I think, 400 hours into. And keep in mind, I'm not a body and paint guy. I can work my way through fiberglass work. I've been doing fiberglass work on cars and other projects for probably the last 20 years, and I'm completely self-taught. One of my uncles lived in Hawaii and did surfboards, so he was a great resource when I started dabbling into fiberglass work. And then, of course, having Jeff Miller as a close friend doesn't hurt either. I'm in contact and pretty good friends with Jeff Kleiner, who's in the middle part of the country. So when I was doing a lot of the body modifications to Slthrr N, I had a great resource pool in which to pull from. So keep that in mind with this top. Those hours are hours that I spent fitting this top to the car. And one of those big reasons for fitting the top to the car is that it did not come trimmed. If you order, or if you buy one of these hardtops from Mr. Bruce, that's who I got it from, Bruce Cervenic, and you live in the Pennsylvania area, you can bring your car or your car body to him, and he'll do a rough cut of the hardtop when you purchase one of these hardtops from him. But I'm on the other coast, and so I didn't want him to do any trimming or anything on the top because I wanted to make sure that it fit the way I wanted to fit on the car. And so with that, it came with no trimming to this bottom area where you see the bulb seal right here. So I wanted to make sure that this made good contact with the car and fit the car exactly how I wanted it. I did not want any gaps. And so when Bruce sent this to me in the crate, none of that was trimmed. Now, the front part was trimmed, and it was ready basically with a slot that comes over the top of the windshield frame right here. So that wasn't too big. It wasn't too big of a deal. The windows or the window openings had to be trimmed, and I let Jeff Miller do all that. He took care of all the margins for that. I do not run side curtains or windows on this thing. The reason we have a hardtop, one, is I just think it's a killer look. I just love the way the hardtop looks on these cars. And the second reason is Mrs. IE427 is very fair-skinned. And anytime we do a ride or go on a cruise, even with a hat on, her head gets sunburned. And so this helps protect all those sun rays from just cooking her like a lobster. So it looks cool, and it protects the occupants from all the sun. I don't drive the car in the rain, but it would help with that too. But since the car doesn't have wipers, chances are you're going to pull over and wait for a cloud burst to kind of subside before you continue to drive. The other reason that the hardtop took so long to fit is because, one, it does not come with a rear window. You're completely responsible for the rear window and how it's going to attach to the rear hatch. As you can see, I put it in with some stainless steel button head screws all the way around. And then, of course, I had this is Lexan. I tinted it. So I took it to my tint shop, and they tinted it. And it had, it's almost 5 years that I've had this on here now, and you can see I've got some bubbles here in the corner. It's just tough with the amount of flex that you see in the Lexan to keep the tint, stretched and adhered. It's like, as a builder, they say you can have three things. It can be done well, fast, or cheap, and you can only pick two. Well, with the tint, it's kind of the same way. You can't have it, dark. You can't have it fit and not stretch in areas like that, especially when you're dealing with Lexan. So when it gets bad enough, and it gets to a point where I can't stand anymore, I'll unscrew the entire window, and I'll take it and I'll have it retinted, and then it'll be fine for another 5 years. The other thing is that Bruce doesn't give you any means to latch the rear hatch. And so I came up with one of these T-handles that you'll see on pickups, the back of pickups for like a camper shell. And so this basically locks in, and when it's locked, it will not open. When it's not unlocked, you can see it'll open right up. And then I've got some gas shocks that hold it up when I want it in the open position, and you can see how the rods right here go into the top to keep it locked. So very, very time consuming, very labor intensive. And when I look at it, and I'm staring at it right now, even with all the dust on it, it still amazes me that Jeff painted the hardtop separate from the car, and the stripes line up perfectly. So it's hard to see in this light, but the stripes here line up perfectly between the car and the hardtop. Unbelievable paint on this car, even with the dust on it. The surface of the paint is like glass. And I just continue to give Jeff Miller kudos every time I talk to him, telling him what a fabulous job he did on this car. He does a fabulous job on all of our cars, but I'm particularly tickled with the job that he did on this car. And I'll tell you a little story after we go through some of the other stuff about the paint and how it became Slthrn and how this paint came to be. The next thing that I want to talk about, since we're back here, are the fender flares. Now, Miller just loves these fender flares. If you look at the profile of these fenders in comparison to the Factory 5 stock fenders, my fenders are almost 3.5 inches wider at the back than the stock Mark III body that I started with. Now, I got these fender flares from a guy on the forum. There's actually two guys, and they used to be friends, or they knew one another. And so one of the guys' name is, his screen name is Dayton Bill, because I think he lives in Dayton, Ohio. And he sold a number of these fender flares through the forum when people would ask him. He had put them on his car, and then he had the molds that I heard that he got somehow, and he made them for other people. Now, I got him from the original guy, and if I can think of his name, I'll insert the name at the bottom of the screen here, and that's who I got him from. And supposedly, the guy that I got him from was the one who originally did the plugs, the molds, basically, for these fender flares on a Mark II or III. And there was some type of discussion on the forum years back, and the two of them, these two guys got in an argument or a pissing match, and one guy said that he came out with them, and the other guy said he came out with them, and the first guy said that he let the other guy use the plugs, and then he started making them, and it's so I got him from the first guy. So what that involved is it involved taking the stock fenders and cutting the entire body out. So I cut the entire body out, this whole wheel arch out of the car, and then basically used plywood backing and drywall screws to hold it all in place. Well, I put a single layer of resin and fiberglass cloth in to hold everything in place from the front. Then what I did is I took all of that plywood bracketry that I had in the back, I took all of that off, and then I ground down the seam to where I was right at the edge of that cloth that I had started from the front side, and then I started building it up. I would put a layer of cloth and resin, and then I would go with some fiberglass mat, and I would alternate between mat and cloth. The cloth is actually stronger, but the mat allows you to get it into all the cracks and crevices where you can't get the cloth to go in because it doesn't conform to those small little areas. And so I built it up in about 5 layers, and then after that was all done, I came and went back to the front side of the fenders, the outside where you see, and I ground that all down again to where I was right at that level that I had started the cloth, and then I built that up with a few layers and got it all smooth. And that's when I basically, that's how Jeff Miller got it. I didn't use any body filler or anything else. I drove around with those fenders just the way they were. I used some rattle can body primer, because Jeff said it wouldn't be a big deal to sand that off, and just kept the car all black, and I drove it like that for another 2 or 3 years. And then when obviously Jeff got it, he did all the final body work, and they look beautiful today. Jeff has a nickname for these fenders because we've done them on this car, and we did them on my buddy John, whose screen name is JJ Snake Pit. We did them on his car too because he brought his car here for me to do the fenders. And Jeff Miller calls these two girls, he calls them the fat bottom girls, because from the back, this thing has hips like you've never seen on a Cobra before. So there's the fender flares. And then the last and probably second most prominent feature on the car is going to be the Super Snake hood. And I saw one of the original Super Snakes at the Shelby Museum many, many years ago. And I fell in love with the hood. And of course, anybody that sees it, asks, oh, does it have a 427 with dual superchargers? No, it doesn't. You're going to be, you're going to be disappointed when you actually see what the car has in it. But needless to say, the car still almost makes 500 horsepower and 450 foot-pounds of torque. So it gets up and goes. But I really wanted the look of the Super Snake hood. There's a lot of her labor in this car too. You guys don't see a lot of it, but she helps me out with a lot of the builds out here, especially when it comes to putting bodies on and taking them off, and then bleeding brakes and stuff like that. So a lot of her labor is in this car as well. And if you remember, this was my first build. This was my first Factory 5 build from start to finish. And so there were a lot of days that Mrs. IE427 spent with me out here. I mean, she and I dropped the motor in this car. Twice. Two different motors, because it doesn't have the original donor motor in it right now. It has something else. But, so I really wanted that Super Snake hood. And, again, I got that Super Snake hood from Bruce Cervenic, Mr. Bruce, on most of the Cobra forums. So I think that's going to wrap this one up. I want to keep all of these videos, these 3 videos, relatively short. And then the next one, like I said, I think we'll go through, a yearly maintenance type of what I do on the car. Since we missed the Texas Spring Meet this year, I kind of forewent all of the maintenance that I would normally do on Slthrn, and so it needs to be done. I've still got maintenance to do over on the workbench as well, but that might have to wait. We've got a lot of stuff going on in the shop right now, and the dually might just have to wait for maintenance, but that's okay. Well, it'll get it. So anyways, if you're enjoying the content here, and if you enjoy the look at Slthrn, go ahead and do the like, the share, the subscribe, all that kind of stuff. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.